Joe started taking films around 1968-69 on 8mm cine. And in addition to that, he moved then to Super 8 then in the late 70s. And there is literally not a bridge or station or level crossing that Joe didn't take a picture or film of. It's quite an incredible collection that Joe shot over a period of nearly 50 years, and he sadly passed away in 2012. But courtesy of Joe's family, they donated his film collection to the society, and with some of the skills I learned in digitizing films and editing them, I've been able to put together these shows, and they're all digital shows. We've never had an actual analog show. Um, just one tip, actually, just as I'm about to play the actual video files, if you because it's 8mm cine, it's not perfectly sharp or pin sharp like a still image, and it was obviously the quality is for projecting onto a big screen as we would have normally have done in the premises in Euston Station. But I can recommend that if you're sitting at your computer screens, try not to sit too close to it, because they say the quality might not look amazing, but if you're further away from the screen as it would have been intended to have been shown, it tends to look better. But I hope the quality in the scenes that you'll see will be worthy of presentation tonight. As Jane mentioned, there are 4 films that I intend to show. The first is Joe's films that he recorded, a mix mash of films that I've edited together, which show the line side activity between Cork and Portlaoise up the Dublin-Cork main line. Then in the second film, we're going to move to the Midlands and Mayo and look at the Ballina branch and Claremorris, as well as the Loughrea branch. Then we'll break, as Jane says, for 15 minutes. The third film is a bonus film. I'd always put in a bonus film just randomly, and that's going to be the spoil trains operating between Macmarone and Belfast. So that's kind of a bonus that wasn't advertised for tonight. And then the concluding film will travel along the Suir Valley from Limerick to Waterford. So I'm going to hit share screen. This is actually just a few slides just before the show begins. So on the left-hand side, you can see that's more or less some of the 8mm cine films, 2 or 3-inch reels and 5-inch one, about three or 4 minutes on the smaller ones and about 10 minutes on the larger ones. And the method of which I've been going through all these films is basically using my own projector, which you can see in the bottom picture, and literally cataloging the scenes one by one, by train, locomotive class, location, and date. It took I've gone through about 600 or 700 films of Joe's, and this is actually how the catalogue that I've developed for the films actually appear in the system I've made. So you can see there's films 10, 11, and 12, and I have each scene recorded with the type of train, goods, permanent way, passengers, the class of locomotive, the actual number of the locomotive, and then locations and the dates. Unfortunately, we don't have an accurate date for most of Joe's films, but I've been able to kind of do a bit of research through the Journal and Railfans News to get an idea of when he shot them. That's actually the films themselves. Once I go through them, I label them and I put them into storage so that if need be, I can retrieve them quite easily. Then this is the actual video editor, which is called Pinnacle Studio. So having digitized the films, which is a whole different process, which I don't have time tonight to show, but this shows you the editor. So you can see there's a number of films in the editor, and then I have a timeline, then which I import the films into. And then you can see there's multiple films then in this particular timeline. And then I do some restoration work on it. So you can see the picture quality isn't particularly great. The color is slightly off, but I'm able to improve it a bit by restoring the colors and sharpening the image using the settings on the right-hand side. Then the last sequence really is just showing, actually adding the actual background music, because the music is a very important integral part of the actual film show. And without it, anyone who knows it, if you're just sitting in silence, it's not particularly enjoyable. But I like to think that the music adds to the atmosphere and watching these vintage scenes that Joe recorded. But you can see in the timeline how each clip, I've sliced it up as if I was slicing actual films together. So even just one film that I'm going to show tonight, it may well have come from about 20 or 30 separate films which I've combined together. So it does take an awful lot of work, but it's very rewarding when it all comes together. And then this was the splash screen, which I just used just to show some of the scenes that you're going to see tonight. So I'm going to start with the first film, which, as I mentioned, is all to do with the Dublin Cork main line, and it's going to begin. And you should be able to hear music. So I'm going to bring this to full screen, and I'm going to let the film roll. So we're at the northern end of the tunnel in Cork. This is Kilbarry with a down train from Dublin. And heading in the opposite direction out of the tunnel, A8R, with a set of the, as it was, a trial run of the Mark II super train stock. You'll notice that it hasn't been painted yet. It's still in bottle green undercoat livery. And this is a slightly unusual train that Joe captured. GM diesel, short rake of oil tanks with a heating fan attached on the back. And this is Blarney, so we're heading just a little bit up the line. A typical train of the Dublin Cork main line as it was in the early 70s. And this is Rathpeacon, A25R with a shunting a beet train, which was destined, as it was in those days, for Turles sugar beet factory, and as well as Mallow, of course. I think that's Jim O'D on the left-hand side of this shot at Rathpeacon, and that's A10R with an liner train from Cork, which features some of the back-to-back fertiliser wagons, which are very short-lived. And this particular liner has a lot of the new refrigerated containers. And this is Rathduff. And then we just move briefly away from the Cork main line down the Cove line to Tivoli. And this is A8R arriving with an empty oil train from Balnacorty. And there's Joe. As Tom was saying earlier, just before the show began, he was probably the first person to do selfies. In this particular shot, that's the magnesite unloading facility in Tivoli. These particular scenes date from around 1971 or early 71, when the siding at Tivoli was put in for the Balnacorty traffic. And this particular train was often combined with the magnesite, so it was a magnesite and oil train, and you'll see the train being combined here at Rathpeacon on the main line. So A10R's arrived with the magnesite wagons, and A8R will back its oil tanks onto the wagons. that shows her. Why wouldn't you not take a picture? And so the combined train heads north to Limerick Junction, where it would reverse, head to Waterford, and then onward to Balnacourty. This is Mallow. I think that's 008. I think, yeah, freshly repainted into Super Train livery, so she's no longer A8R, and that's a permanent way train heading south through the station. If I'm not mistaken, that was one of the engines that was destroyed by terrorists up by the border. In a double-headed southbound oil train, again at Mallow. That's Joe inside Limerick Junction cabin. I think it's the south cabin. Here we see another trial train, again of the Mark II stock in the undercoat green livery. Single 121 with the tan coloured cement wagons. And a Limerick to Waterford train will actually Rosslare Harbour, because you'll see at the end of the train there's some container flats with the old style BR con flats. That used to be that particular traffic was routed normally through Dungarvan, but had since been rerouted following the closure of that line. And that's the now preserved A3R, arriving at the Limerick Junction from the north. And this was the particular movement that the Balnacourty oil train had to make in order to gain access to the Limerick to Waterford line. You can see it's reversing backwards out at the northern end of the station, having run round. And this is the down Mayo train from Dublin, headed by B206, the first C-class engine to be re-engined with GM power unit. You see the TPO behind the train and behind the engine. And this is the up Mayo from Cork, again with TPO. We see A8R again in the company of a Sulzer locomotive with an empty ballast train. That's on the direct curve at Limerick Junction. another Sulzer B105. This is at Turles, where the Sulzer engines were generally based towards the end of their career, working the ballast trains out of Lisduff, which you see here. So B105 is reversing through the old station and into Lisduff Quarry. I reckon this is about the summer of 1974, with the new ballast wagons having come on stream. And that's at Templemore. And this particular interesting working, it's a push-pull suburban train from Dublin. I think it may be en route to Limerick Junction to be turned round following the accident at Gormanston, and when they just basically changed the direction of the particular push-pull sets to mitigate against any further accidents. This is Dundrum, north of Limerick Junction, taken on the day it closed, 6th of September 1976. Up train passing through the station, which remained a block post until about the mid-1980s. Down cement train. Now we have that's particular Joe there at Keen's Point at Limerick Junction. This is the Saoirseal train, the express train from Limerick to Dublin. It was an 8:30 departure, which ran via Limerick Junction. A run-round loop was put in to enable the train to reverse, which B189 is doing there. And this is Ballybrophy. A53 has worked the 8 o'clock train from Limerick via Nina, and it will attach its carriages onto the rear of the Saoirseal train, which you see approaching. You'll notice that the Saoirseal train has a GM diesel and the recently re-engined Maybach C-Class B233. So you see A53 backing its train onto the rear of the express from Limerick. B145 and B233. They make their departure from Ballybrophy. Very typical Crossley engine that was, with all the smoke billowing out of the top of the exhaust. That's Ballybrophy signal cabin, which I think was dispensed with about 1987. That's C207 shunting cattle wagons, which is brought from the meat factory in Roscrea. And this is the other Maybach C-Class that was re-engined in the late 1960s, B234. Now we move to Clonkeene, which is south of Portlaoise, again on the Dublin-Cork main line, and we see the CTC relay train. Basically a train that was putting down cables for the centralised traffic control. You can see the men on the flat wagons, and then that's the actual plough. The bridge, the underbridge you see, is on the Cool Namona, Board Namona 3-foot gauge system. These scenes date, I think, around February 1976, during the installation of the CTC signalling. And there's the plough. And that's Portlaoise signal cabin. And that's the train arriving. Now there's single line working on this particular day. As you'll see, an up train is being rerouted back onto its proper line. You'll see the new signals are already in place. The semaphores don't have that much long to live. And as you see, here are the men taking away the semaphores. It's around, the date I have for this is the 24th, 25th of January. So 190 leading a train south out of Portlaoise station. That particular bracket signal was the one that guarded the junction south of Portlaoise towards the line to Kilkenny, which still exists as far as Connaberry. That's the Mount Mellick Bay platform that's on the right hand side. And as you can see, the new signals are now live as 011 heads south with Mark II stock. The real Joe's record, I mean, it gives a really great record of the variety of trains that you saw during the late 60s, early 1970s on CIE at that time. So that's the conclusion of the first film. So I hope you all liked it. So in the next film, we're going to move to the Midlands and visit the railways around Mayo, which includes the Ballina branch, as well as the Loughrea branch, taken post-closure. So we're going to start at Moat on the Mullingar-Athlone line. This was taken around April 1973, just before the mainline trains to the west were rerouted via Port Arlington. That's probably a Galway Dublin train. You'll notice the four-wheel TPO at the end of this. A light engine arriving from the Athlone direction, followed by a goods train. This is a train arriving from the Dublin direction behind A31R. And this is setting up, the signalman is setting up the automatic electric train staff, which if you look very carefully, you'll see it being snatched up. And so we move to Atymon junction for the Loughrea branch, and we see 042 arriving with a long rake of empty beat wagons. It was still common in those days just to see a single 121 heading a mainline train. And this is the intermediate station at Dunsandle. Thank you. 175. This was taken after the Loughrea branch had closed in November 1975, and you'll see Loughrea shortly with boarded up windows. These trains, for whatever reason, they don't seem to have been recorded in the journal. So Joe is one of the only record I know who actually managed to record them, photograph and film them. So you can see beat wagons 175 picking up the wagons at Dunsandle. And that's Mrs. Whelan, the halt keeper, on the left. And that's 175 in Loughrea. Doing a little bit of shunting. And passing the old engine shed. You can see already that track lifting had commenced. The siding in the foreground hadn't been lifted. And it was getting a bit dark by the time the train made it to Atymon. Shot probably in the depths of winter, December 1975, I reckon. A month or so after the closure of the branch line. It wasn't just GM diesels, A-Class was featured also, so this is 011, again arriving at Dunsandle with roughly the same beat working. And that's Mrs. Whelan, we had to greet the train. The vans, I reckon they probably were conveying beat pulp. Anyone familiar with the B-train workings from the 70s will remember that a lot of the H vans were marshalled amongst the Bullade wagons. They were conveying beat pulp. So a relatively short train arriving into Loughrea on this occasion. And you'll see that the windows of the station building, some of them have been boarded up already. So 11 runs round the train. This is just approaching Cosmona gates, just outside Loughrea station. You can really see the weather's pretty miserable, but as anyone would know Joe St. Ledger, that never put him off getting out and about and recording these particular trains. And this is a track recovery or rail recovery train that Joe recorded on the branch line. So this is at Tullabon, just south of Dunsandle, B201 class engine. So again, I imagine this was a case of just trying to recover whatever material along the branch line. B222 maybe. And now so we move on to the approach to Galway, and a train from Dublin arriving behind B184. And we see the same train departing Galway. And that's B146, the preserved engine at the Downpatrick in County Down, which is the ITG preserved, arriving at Athenry. And then we move up the Western Rail corridor through Ballyglunan, passing the sugar factory at Tuam. And this is Claremorris, train from Dublin arriving. A8R, which we've already seen a few times. An A18R arriving from the Westport direction. See a Burma Road train heading north out of Claremorris behind an A-class. So that's a Limerick to Sligo goods. And then we see branch train arriving from Ballina into Claremorris. followed by the train from Westport. And then we have the opposite goods working from Sligo, heading for Limerick, coming off the Burma Road, which has some 20-foot containers on the train. And after a bit of shunting, the same train picked up a bubble cement wagon, back-to-back fertiliser, a Bull-Aid wagon, and you'll see for some particular reason it had picked up a carriage as well, so maybe that was just a transfer working to Limerick. That's B121 arriving into Claremorris, and then another 121. And this is Ballina. Now, 121s were popular engines on the Western Rail corridor during the mid-1970s. And this is the intermediate station on the Ballina branch at Foxford. And it was closed at this time. It closed in 1963, but it was reopened in 1988. And this is the River Moy, south of Foxford. Again, a real great variety of loose coupled goods wagons on the trains in those days. Rather short train, again a branch working. And this is the IRRS tour to Ballina, which started in Claremorris, 8:30 and this was the 7th of May 1972. I wonder, will anyone spot themselves in this particular sequence? That's Ballyverry, and that's Father Tom Davitt, that's Foxford again. An arrival into Ballina. Of course, in those days, Ballina still had a second platform. It was removed in the mid-70s to accommodate the freight facilities. And then we're back at Claremorris with these quite busy scenes. I think this was the day that, in addition to the Society's outing, there was also a few knock specials. And so that brings us to the conclusion of the second film, and I think we will take a break for 15 minutes to allow everyone to catch up.
That's great. Thanks very much, Ciarán. Hope you all enjoy the first two shows, or first two films, I should say.
Right, so first of all, I have to say congratulations to you and the team in Dublin on a great show, and obviously to Ciarán in particular for all the effort in sorting out the films. You've mentioned the double bill of meetings in Manchester and London on the 12th of November. Just wanted to remind people how to get the access codes for those meetings. Basically, you need to email the appropriate branch and ask to be included on the branch email list. The email addresses are irrsmanchester@gmail.com or irrslondon@hotmail.com. But don't worry if you didn't pick up those email addresses, because you'll be able to get them through the parent body website and the 2 individual branch websites. But that's the way to get the access codes. If you get on the branch email list, you will automatically receive the codes for every future online meeting. Anyway, 3 weeks' time, 12th of November, get on the virtual ferry and come across to England, and we look forward to seeing you. Thank you, Stu.
Thank you, Tim.
Great, thanks. So Ciarán, let's just start there whenever you're good to go.
Okay, so second part, and this film is the bonus one, because each film show I tend to just insert a random film, and this particular one covers the spoil trains working from Macramorn on the Larne line to Belfast, to the M2 motorway construction site just outside York Road Station. So this kind of demonstrates that Joe not only did he cover Munster area extensively, but he did travel further afield, and he dealt very well with recording particular workings that weren't really on his own patch, which you'll see. So these were recorded around 1969 up to 1971, so you'll see the last spoil train working, as well as some of the early ones. So I hope some of our participants from Ulster will enjoy these particular shots that Joe recorded. So we're at, there's a siding laid at Fort William, just outside Belfast, alongside where the motorway will be constructed. And these were Joe's particular scenes. And then in the foreground there is the siding, an MED unit, and the WT class tank engine for the spoil train. If I'm not mistaken, that they could only be unloaded from one side, if that's correct, the spoil wagons. A bit of a bumpy ride for that van. And this is Portrush, with an MPD unit and another one of the WT tanks, which I think these were recorded around April 1969, one of the last few seasons where you had steam workings to Portrush. Number 51 at the buffer stops. And this is Downshire Halt and a spoil train passing. And you'll see the top and tail working with the engines facing the one on the rear, facing out chimney first. And this is just the cutting, I believe, just outside Whitehead. And that's Slaughterford Bridge, again, just outside Whitehead. And now Troopers Lane. And coming out of Whitehead Tunnel. And this is Macramorn, the quarry where the spoil was obtained. one of the 70 class rail cars, which were fairly new in those days. Again, another MED rail car. Again, just outside, just on the Belfast side of Whitehead Tunnel. Back at Macklemore, we have some scenes of the trucks dumping the load into wagons. See up and down trains passing at Macklemore. That's the signal cabin just on the right hand side. And then heading out along the main line towards Belfast. There's Macklemore signal cabin. And one of the 70 class rail cars, ported at Whitehead Station. And a couple of scenes, early days at Whitehead, with Guinness engine number 3. Doing some train rides. The Rosslare 12-wheeler express carriage. There's open wagon rides. Some great fun to be had. Maybe someone can tell me, but there appears to be a headboard just on the smoke box of that leading engine. This is again taken on just beyond Whitehead Tunnel between Whitehead and Kilroot. Arriving into Macklemore from Belfast with an empty train. And as you can see, now there's that headboard there again. So maybe someone can tell me at the end of the show just which particular board that one was. And so we moved to the final working, 2nd of May 1970. 7,600 spoil operations, and that's the preserve number 4. About to take the train back to Belfast. And I believe some guests arrived by the 70 class rail car, and you can see them disembarking. Probably NIR officials. But Joe didn't wait around there. He actually went to the site deciding at Fort William to see the train arriving. And unloading. And then the same set, the rail car we saw, passes the last spoil train. I think that was a glimpse of the temporary signal cabin that was established at Fort William for controlling particular movements in and out. And so that concludes that bonus film of Joe's. Right, so the final film we're going to see tonight covers the Suir Valley from Limerick to Waterford. Very, very interesting workings you'll see in these particular shots that Joe recorded. It's certainly a big contrast compared to today's setup, where the line is so lightly used each week. So I think you'll be pretty impressed with the amount of workings that Joe got and the variety of traffic that used to actually travel through the likes of Clonmel, Cahir, Tipperary, and all these particular major towns in County Tipperary. So we're going to begin in Limerick. There's the man himself. And this was taken around 1971 when they're making major track alterations in Limerick Station. And that's pilot engine, it's Crossley C-Class C207. That engine C207, that was taken out of service not long after this particular shots Joe recorded and re-engined. And now we move to the intermediate station at Drumkeen. See driver and signalman exchanging staffs. This was taken 6th of September 1976, the same day as the station at Dundrum, which we saw earlier, and which closed to passengers. And we're back at Limerick Junction. This is a Rosslare bound train going over the Dublin Cork main line. And so we move to Clonmel, one of the Wickham inspection cars passing through. And again, you'll see just a variety of particular traffic on these particular trains. I'll just actually maybe grab another look at that again, actually, because it's worth actually just reviewing that particular clip. I mean, you see the wagons and the tin van. I've actually replayed it a few times myself. 051, H van, tin van, bullied wagons, oil cars, some of the PAL vans. Real mix of stuff as it was back in the mid-1970s. A46, or these were taken between Cahir and Clonmel, I think. A train of mostly empty beef wagons. Although given it looks to be taken in summertime, so I doubt that was during the beef season. Now we have a Soldier engine ballast train B105 with the as they were then the new ballast wagon. So this is taken around 1974. So this train would have worked from Lisduff. Also a freshly repainted plough van as well. And you'll see the method as it was until quite recent years with these particular wagons. They had to be unloaded with men walking alongside the train and releasing the load. It's quite a different, you don't see shots like that anymore, particularly with the Hobbs wagons. One of the Great Southern and Western Railway plough vans. Now we're back at Clonmel and we see an the magnesite and oil train heading from Cork to Balnacourty with the ballast waiting in the loop. And at Cahir, and then back at Limerick Junction, an up train from Cork with Mark II stock. And this particular train here, I believe this is an empty magnesite working. The magnesite wagons hadn't entered service at this time and they were using just open hoppers, which you can see the tarpaulin didn't really do an effective job, being blown away. So the ballast pulls out onto the main line. Light engine going across the flat crossing before B105 heads back to Lisduff. This is A3R, which we saw earlier, passing through Cahir. Some P-way work being carried out in the loop at Cahir. Before A3R returns with a lengthy goods train. Now we see A3R again with the Inchicore steam crane. Now this is attending to a derailment that happened near Cahir on the 16th of October 1975. See, it's a bit of a mess. It was the 2130 Bell Ferry train from Limerick to Waterford. The last 8 four-wheel conflats derailed, causing that particular accident. This particular shot, I've speeded up the film. Otherwise, we'd be here all night watching it. But you can kind of see what's going on. So with the line reinstated, that was on the 17th of October, so the line was more or less reopened within a couple of days of the derailment. Rather misty day, 004, with a liner train, mostly made up of the 20-foot containers. As I mentioned, it's quite extraordinary to see such trains passing along this particular route, whereas nowadays there's hardly any freight whatsoever, none regular anyway. Magnesite train behind A20R. You can see the relatively freshly laid replacement track. And the oil wagons as it was back on the rear. And now we have a long rake of beat wagons behind A49R. Back at Clonmel, all the sleepers you see on the right have come from the lifting of the line via Fethard. The E106 departing with a Waterford bound goods. And then A26R again with a similar train to A49, all empty beat wagons. Which actually you'll notice, I think, in this formation, yeah, you'll see that there's a solitary wooden framed wagon. Most of those were phased out during the mid-70s, leaving just the bullied wagons. The passenger train from Waterford approaches. And you'll see quite frequently the 20-foot container marshalled amongst the usual H vans. This is a P-way train, B184. I think was collecting some of the materials recovered from the line that, again, between 1969 and 1970, you had the lifting of the line, the Clonmel-Thurles branch, and that's Joe walking across the rather rusty track at Farrannaleen station. And here we have the track lifting train, formed of the former Great Northern Articulated Railcar F, ex-UTA 104. These scenes date from around 1970. If you're wondering why on earth the front of the rail car looks like that, it was because in November 1970 actually, this particular rail car was damaged in Clonmel after some hand points were changed by school children in the station, and the rail car collided with a couple of wagons. So that's why it has that rather ugly front. Just look at the sleepers stacked on that. So there's Joe at Fethard, which was really the only major town on the Clonmel-Thurles branch. You can see the power unit in the centre of the rail car was articulated. Yeah, it's not particularly nice looking. This was done by McGurk's contractors of Carrigans, and they also lifted sections of the Mallow-Waterford line, as well as parts of the Derry Road and the former Mead Road between Clonsilla and Navan. They had all sorts of catering and sleeping facilities for the men, and that's heading over the village of Fethard, and that's heading back towards Clonmel. The abutment of that bridge is still survives to this day. And then we're back at Clonmel. Fortunately, the other end of the rail car was still relatively intact, which you'll see in a second. This is A35R arriving in from the Limerick Junction direction, and it has some of the brand new bogie flat wagons. But again, as you've seen in other shots, it's marshalled amongst the loose couple stock. Now, this was another particular derailment. This occurred on the 4th of July 1973. The culprit was that cement van that you see in the foreground, one of the ex-Great Northern cement vans. Seven wagons of a Limerick-bound goods had derailed, wrecked about a mile of track, I think. So you'll see the repair job that's been done. That's at Mylerstown, just outside Clonmel. As I've read up about this particular derailment, it was odd that that cement van was even on that particular train, because normally those ex-Great Northern cement vans work between Athy and the cement factory in Drogheda, as well as Dublin. So why it was on the Limerick-Waterford line is a bit of a mystery. That's the preserved A39R, which we've seen once already before. And here we see Joe recording the men on their way to the P-Way site. and that's unloading the materials in Clonmel. I'm not too sure exactly where this is. I think it's near Dunkit, but we see B145 with the 35-ton steam crane, 94A. You can see it's attending to a new decking to a culvert bridge. That crane was normally based in Limerick. See some of the relatively new ballast wagons were also in action. And then this is in Waterford West. And we just conclude with a couple of scenes of trains coming off the Suir Viaduct just outside Waterford. That's an empty oil train coming from Balnacourty. A few bitumen tanks, I think, on the rear of that as well. And then heading onwards to Limerick Junction and to Cork. And then the next train we see is the empty Dolomite with 2 GM diesels. So this train would have been working up towards Bennett's Bridge. And so away, and you can see it's taking the line towards Dublin, whereas the one on the left is to Limerick Junction. And that concludes tonight's film show. Thank you very much. I hope you all enjoyed it and that we could all meet up again. And I say, Joe, I think I'd love if Joe was around us to see the wonders of the technology that we're able to actually share this material online tonight. Be blown away by this technology, and of course all the kind comments and compliments about the films he recorded. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Ciarán. Really enjoyed that. Hope everybody else did online as well. We'd only give you a big round of applause now, so just have to imagine it for tonight, Ciarán, I'm afraid. But I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
We can all do one, I suppose.
Yeah.
So